Please don't forget subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notified of new daily videos.
I never thought my quiet life, rooted in my grandmother's historic art studio and gardens, would become a battleground. For decades, the property, nestled on the edge of what's now called Crestwood Village, was my sanctuary. When my grandmother passed, I moved out, choosing to rent it to fellow artists. For the past 12 years, the brilliant sculptor, Sarah, had called it home. Crestwood Village started as a quaint artists' colony, but rapidly transformed into an exclusive artisans collective, under the guidance of powerful developers. Leading the charge was Barnaby Owens, a man whose charisma was only matched by his ambition. Barnaby himself had bought a substantial parcel adjacent to mine from my family years ago, and he never missed an opportunity to remind everyone how integral he was to the collective's prestige. The ACB, the Artisans Collective Board, had long eyed my property. It sat at a crucial junction, perfect for their grand entrance, a statement archway and a visitor check-in gallery. I repeatedly refused to join their collective, valuing my independence. Then, 3 years ago, things changed. Sarah's young daughter, Lily, was terrified by repeated incidents of vandalism at the studio. Art supplies ruined, strange noises, and once, a small fire set near an outdoor sculpture. Sarah, distraught, called me. Days later, Barnaby approached me with an irresistible offer. Join the ACB, and they'd build a state-of-the-art security perimeter around the entire village, including my property, with advanced surveillance and a dedicated security presence. In return, I'd be exempt from all ACB fees and rules, and they'd maintain my extensive art gardens. It seemed like a no-brainer. I signed. The security work took over a year. The massive, beautifully crafted archway and the sleek visitor check-in gallery were impressive, stretching partly onto my land as per our easement. A month to the day after completion, Sarah received a citation from the ACB about unapproved outdoor installations, her daughter's whimsical fairy garden. When she reminded them of my exemptions, she was told they had been retroactively canceled. I finally opened the pile of ignored ACB correspondence. The reality hit me like a ton of bricks. They demanded 1. Immediate payment of back fees for over a year. 2. Repayment for the gardening services they'd provided. 3. A cancellation of my easement payment, claiming the contract allowed them to use small unused portions of member land for free. 4 fines for every alleged infraction by Sarah. My lawyer, Gregory, confirmed the worst. The ACB had the right to revoke exemptions, needing only 30 days' notice. As I left the courthouse, utterly defeated, Barnaby was there. "Eleanor," he sneered, "perhaps next time read the fine print before you sign. You had your chance to be a founding member." His smug satisfaction made my blood boil. Barnaby's words echoed in my mind. "Read the fine print." I went home, grabbed the hefty ACB contract, the original easement documents, and every piece of paper they'd ever sent. I was determined to find something. I wasn't going to let them get away with this. I didn't get past the first few pages. My property, legally, was complex. Years ago, I'd officially subdivided a small, overgrown section at the very back, intending to build a small annex studio for my own use, or perhaps a guest house. It had its own unique parcel ID, separate from the main art studio and gardens where Sarah lived. When I had granted the initial easement for the archway and check-in gallery, and when I joined the ACB, they had asked for the property ID. In my haste, or perhaps because the small parcel was technically my property, I had provided the ID for that specific subdivided, undeveloped plot. The ACB lawyers, in their arrogance and haste, had simply copied it. The next day, Barnaby personally delivered 2 notices, one formally canceling my exemptions in 30 days, and another terminating the easement agreement on my unused portion in 30 days. He savored the moment, a cruel smirk plastered on his face. He thought he had me cornered. Exactly 30 days later, to the hour, I arrived at Barnaby's opulent gallery office within the village. I had 2 documents for him to sign: a notice of my intent to begin construction on my ACB-registered property, the small, undeveloped parcel, and a formal demand for the removal of their entire entrance archway, visitor check-in gallery, and all associated security installations from my main property within 30 days. Barnaby's face drained of color as he read them. He tried to speak, but I just turned and left. Early the next morning, Gregory, my lawyer, called. He'd obviously heard from the ACB. He informed me their structures would remain on my land as they constituted unused portions. I calmly corrected him. That parcel is no longer unused. I'm building a small artist's retreat there. It's barely large enough for a single structure, let alone their massive archway. He scoffed, suggesting a court would never allow such spiteful construction. I then suggested he look up the specific parcel ID associated with their existing easement and my ACB membership. I'm fairly certain he heard the satisfied smile in my voice. It took 5 agonizing days for them to call back. Gregory, now sounding much less confident, argued that the easement couldn't be unilaterally canceled. I simply emailed him a photograph of their own notice terminating the easement on my unused portion. That afternoon, Barnaby called, attempting to invite me to lunch. I politely declined. He called again 2 days later, same answer. Other prominent ACB members tried to reason, some with threats, some with feigned sympathy. My answer was consistently, no, thank you. Finally, a different lawyer, David Finch, contacted me, stating he wanted to negotiate a surrender, his words, not mine. I agreed to meet him. I came prepared with my new easement proposal. It was a masterpiece of malicious compliance, a document designed to make their lives a living hell. 1. It included everything from the old easement. 2. It changed, mow the lawn to maintain the entire property to the highest Crestwood Village aesthetic standards. 3. The monthly fee skyrocketed from a negligible amount to $5,000. This amount would increase annually with inflation, a clause missing from the original. 4. A cancellation fee of $75,000 would be due if they ever terminated the agreement for any reason. 5. The contract would automatically terminate 30 days after. Any disciplinary action was taken against me, Sarah, or the property. Any complaints were formally levied by the ACB. Any legal action was taken against the property by anyone in the ACB. 6. David Finch would mediate any disputes at the ACB's expense. 7. The ACB would pay all my legal fees if any legal action was taken against me by anyone. David looked aghast. He called it unfair, but promised to present it to Barnaby. I reminded him that in 8 days, I had a demolition crew scheduled to remove everything currently on my main property. That evening, Barnaby called, furious. He swore he'd never sign. I calmly replied, okay. He ranted about the fees, the maintenance, the extortion. I simply pointed out that when the original agreement was signed, Crestwood Village was still developing and there were other access points. Now my property was the only grand entrance. He eventually sputtered that I'd hear from his lawyers. The next morning, David called. He asked if I'd come to sign the contract. When I arrived, I learned David was only a paralegal. He handed me the document. I insisted on reading every single line. He chuckled. I'm sure you will, I read. Not a single word had been changed. Barnaby's signature was on it, with David's as a witness. Why did he sign this? I asked David, genuinely perplexed. This is insane. David looked at me, a strange mix of relief and resignation on his face. I tried to tell him it was a terrible decision. He told me I wasn't paid to think or give legal advice and to shut up. So I shut up. He said he'd sign it and sue you later, once their entrance was secure. This was about 2 years ago. It took the ACB 6 months to realize the full extent of the nightmare Barnaby had signed them into. Their lawyers explained they had no viable grounds to sue me. Even if they won, the best outcome would be voiding the easement, which meant dismantling their entire architectural entrance and effectively dissolving the gated community aspect of Crestwood Village, violating their own articles. The biggest sticking point for their legal team was the ACB pays all my legal fees if anyone takes legal action against me clause. It wasn't limited to disputes with the ACB. I told them I was perfectly willing to find out in court. We eventually reached an addendum. Barnaby Owens would personally pay all my legal fees if anyone took legal action against me, unless he held no position in the ACB. The ACB would pay all my legal fees if they initiated legal action. Barnaby resigned from the ACB presidency on the spot, his face purple with rage, in front of everyone. I couldn't resist a polite, "Barnaby, perhaps you should really read documents before you sign them." It was during the first mediation, which David, looking much happier, led, that the full picture emerged. Without that grand entrance, the ACB would cease to be a gated community, breaching their own bylaws and facing dissolution. I also discovered all the village's state-of-the-art security cameras, the main nerve center for their entire system, terminated in the visitor check-in gallery, which was partially on my land. Essentially, it was my way or the end of Crestwood Village as they knew it. Recently, I decided to test the waters again. I had Sarah and her art students build a community sculpture park on a small, visible corner of my property adjacent to the entrance. It was eclectic, a riot of mismatched styles, bright colors, and questionable structural integrity. The ACB called for an emergency mediation. They politely, for them, explained it was an aesthetic blight on the village entrance. I asked for a detailed list of required fixes to bring it up to their standards. The list was extensive, effectively demanding a complete redesign and rebuild by professional landscapers and artists. I thanked them, pulled out the contract, highlighted the clause where they agreed to maintain the entire property to the highest Crestwood Village aesthetic standards, and handed them the list. "The ACB usually prefers these things handled within 30 days, I said. They started to protest until David, the mediator, reminded them of the automatic termination clause. They agreed. I also recently heard that Barnaby sold his prestigious gallery and residence in Crestwood Village, leaving the country for some remote artist commune. Apparently, the ACB had successfully sued him for monumental financial losses stemming from his mismanagement and personal vendetta against me. I still don't fully understand what I ever did to incur such hatred from him, but the justice feels sweet. I'm not sure how much more I'll toy with the ACB. The monthly payments are substantial, and the thought of them having to resculpt a garish garden filled me with immense satisfaction. They got exactly what they deserved for trying to steal my peace and my property.
If you enjoyed this video, please hit the thumbs up button to like it. And please do subscribe to support the channel.